Well, hello everybody. Once again, this is David Lear from Feb25C, and we have Salvita Singh from Lokmedia, and of course the trade unionist himself, Mr. Steve Headley. Now, one of the greatest problems that are facing most people in the trade union industry today, very unfortunately, is inaction. Despite the global trends that are going towards global wars and globalization, nevertheless, those people who are fervently paying their subs every single month with great diligence aren't all doing the action that's required. The problem here is that by just putting in that monthly effort, which is often automated, that's not enough. What's needed is action. Now, Salvenda, you did mention something a while ago, and Gate Gourmet comes to mind. And this is very, very interesting because what we've actually got going on here with that particular matter is you've got workers who need to have the conditions and the right pay. You've got airlines that provide a service to, of course, general public. And here where are the three important parts of society meet: the service providers, the workers, the consumers. And who wins out of this? Well, clearly, obviously, in the case of the airliners and Gate Gourmet, they want to get on and they want to get their business, they want to get their money in. Customers want value for money. The Gate Gourmet workers deserved to be paid a fair wage and to have fair conditions. Now, it's how you come about a solution for something like this, where all three parties of society meet, that perhaps we can actually get the result that we need. So it is, in fact, about the way in which you get the press coverage, the media coverage, and what's actually going on. The greatest problem that we're faced with is the media will often portray it as perhaps workers with a problem, but not identifying it clearly enough. Airlines saying they have difficulties trying to make a profit and run the business profitably, their interests. And then there's the apathetic public who say, well, we just want something to eat on a flight. So what we've really got to do is to address where these three parts of society meet. We've got to raise the level, we've got to raise the bar at which the public will begin to understand fundamentally how really important it is. So that's the part of the media. I think that's the media side of it. And that's where at RFN Media we are very keen as an independent free news media outlet in addressing issues, so when members of the public get to see this, they're always encouraged in anything that we do, in any editorial we provide. We encourage people to understand the subject, talk to other people about it, the action that you can take. Now, Sal, yourself, I mean, in terms of Gate Gourmet, how did that pan out, and how do you think there were elements from that could be successful for raising that bar?
Yes, sir. I was involved in the Gate Gourmet workers' struggle right from the beginning. And what I noticed at these three levels regarding the company, of course, Gate Gourmet was a privatization taking place. And when privatization takes place, obviously that cut corners in the provision of their services, and they want to maximize their profits. And that's only possible by reducing the wages as far as possible and cutting down on the working conditions. So it came to a situation where the workers felt exploited and they weren't getting the right wages, and they went on a strike. And that was a big struggle. And they were on the hill near the airport nearly every day. And they received massive support from the public and solidarity from others. But unfortunately, what tends to happen is amongst the leadership, that amongst the trade union leadership, they made militant speeches, fiery speeches, got everything as if they're going to win. And later on, unfortunately, the very leaders let them down. So there was a meeting in Southall that took place where the leadership was working hand in hand with the interests of the company, because although we said, where do they meet? It's difficult for opposing interests to meet because the company wants to maximize their profit and the workers want to fight for their better conditions and their wages. And these are two opposing interests. So in that meeting, the leadership quickly asked the workers to raise their hands. There were about 750 workers. And they said, look, we've been negotiating, we tried our best. This is the best offer we can give you. And quickly asked them to put their hands. They didn't even get much time to understand what the proposal was and which way to go. And half of them supported and half didn't. And even a threat was made that those who don't, they won't get support of the trade union. And that's what happened. And then you had the group called the sacked gate gourmet workers and those who went to work. And those who went to work found the conditions were even worse before, harsh conditions. And the sacked gate gourmet workers kept the struggle going. And it reached a national level, actually, in terms of support there. And over a period of time, as you know, in the end, things fizzle out. And because of that betrayal, the sacked gate gourmet workers were betrayed in that manner and in the long term lost out. And this seems to happen in many struggles. Gate gourmet workers is just one of them. It happens in other trade union, other working class struggles, because the trade union leadership is closely allied to the Labour Party, works hand in hand with the interest of the companies. And unfortunately, the workers get betrayed repeatedly.
Very interesting too, and at this point, we should introduce Steve Headley once again, because he is very, very familiar, as many of the viewers will soon realise, in being able to give very good, strong, supportive speeches that energise people, and he's able to whip up that support and sense of strength feeling to get things going. But as you've pointed out with the Gate Gourmet case, and as I'm sure Steve will bring perhaps just a story or two to help us understand and to relate what can happen despite the best efforts of trade union leaders like yourself and like Steve, what actually happens is fizzling out, people giving in. These are real problems. Steve, over to you. Perhaps you could throw a bit more light on this, where you think the successes are good with trade unions and where that problem is, whereby people tend to fizzle out, they get weak. And where does the plan go wrong then? How can we change that, do you think?
Well, I think you've got to look at the complete structure of trade unions. I'll give you a couple of brief examples. I went to a meeting of supply teachers in the National Education Union last Saturday, and the official who had put it on was very good intentions, and we were like 20 minutes into the meeting and we were talking about how we change things, and he started to explain how people pass motions at meetings and then it goes to the national executive. And actually, trade unions just need to, in my opinion, get back to basics. If a group of workers at a workplace want to raise an issue and they're confident enough to take action on that issue, the more immediate that action and the stronger that action is, the more likely that they're going to win a dispute. The fact that the trade union bureaucracies are afraid to lose their privileges, their high wages, their expense cards, their company cars, if they break the anti-trade union laws, that means that the unions themselves police the workers far more than the state does. That's the reality of it. And we need to recognise that as rank and file trade unionists. I think the system at the minute is irreformable. I don't think that there's any case, even the RMT, whose leadership famously all crossed their own picket line outside their office for months at a time. I don't think there's any trade union left in Britain that has not become completely bureaucratised and that has got any idea how to fight and win. I think that they can't fight and win. The railway union that I belonged to, the RMT, up until recently, was able to win some battles because of their industrial power, despite the anti-trade union laws. They could cause an awful lot of industrial damage by stopping trains and stopping people getting to work. But not every worker has that power. And especially when people are not encouraged to use that power, not empowered to use that power, but hand over that authority to bureaucracy. Many who aren't elected, some unions, you just get the general secretary elected and they appoint the rest of the team. So that's the way they start. I think it's a structural problem. It's not just a matter of getting people into positions, because even if you get people into positions, those people become bureaucratized themselves.
I think that's really quite an excellent point, isn't it? It's the bureaucratization of trade unions. In other words, I think for the viewers to really understand the fundamental principles behind this, for instance, if you go out to drive a motor vehicle, they license you. If you go out, say, to use specialist radios somewhere, they license you, and so on. They license you. Who are they? It's the government. The problem that we're dealing with here is that people walk all too easily into forming organizations and literally allowing them to be licensed by government. From a media point of view, we've had a lot of difficulties ourselves. As you probably know yourself, there are problems with national unions of journalists. There are big issues there, especially when you consider that, for instance, the BBC, ITN, that's the Independent Television News Networks, ITV, and so on. All these large organizations have got very large amounts of journalists. Basically, you're licensed. And quite frankly, if you do something that's going to upset the status quo of that license, certainly I found I had problems in recent years, you're in trouble as an individual. Now, that's the problem. I think getting a set, perhaps, of good ethics together, a universal, that you wouldn't need to be licensed to operate under, would be a smart move. Just simply having a set of decent ground rules, that even in a court of law, if you're pulled up into a court of law over a union action that you've had to take, that you feel is morally quite right, that way, no lawful judge could turn around and say, well, no, we can't have that particular industrial action going on, because quite frankly, it's ethical, it's moral, and it's not unreasonable. But the minute you sign up to some special code devised by a government, I think that's where is the problem. So I think some kind of new, fresh approach, drawing up a form of universal codes that anyone should act by, would be a very, very good start. After all, we need to hold certainly union leaders to account, just quite simply because they've got a responsibility to those workers that they're representing. So I think that's a great way of holding them to account. Steve, a bit more thought on that, perhaps?
I think the history of trade unions are that they've always been tried to be outlawed and made illegal. I think the difference in the situation now is that the trade union leadership are quite happy to have the anti-union laws to hide behind, and they can say, well, it's not us that's stopping you going on strike, it's the government, because the union funds will be sequestrated. Now let's look at that, the union funds being sequestrated. The union funds being sequestrated wouldn't really matter to the member at all. A member would save 12 quid a month or 15 quid a month or whatever it is. It's the union bureaucrats who would suffer because they wouldn't have their wages paid. Now, see, that is the key now to me. This is what I've seen, because electing new people into those positions after 5 or 10 years, those people start to think like the people that are already in those positions. And I've seen people in several so-called socialists, even they call themselves revolutionary parties, who become bureaucratized. So we need a system where we have instantly recallable delegates. If the delegates are not voting the way the members want them to vote, the members should be able to get rid of them immediately in a quorum meeting with a majority of members. That can be done online. It can be done on Zoom. People don't need to meet physically. And I would take that right up to the union leaderships. If we had a majority of members demanding a vote on a union leader, should they stay or should they go, we should be able to do that as well. I think that's the way forward. Now, see, I don't think, my own perspective is, I don't think we can reach an accommodation with a capitalist system. I think it's a system that's a zero-sum game. If they're making more money, we're making less money. If they're spending money on health and safety, they're losing money in their profits. So personally, I think that any effective trade union has to understand that there's a class war going on and has to be prepared to fight that class war. I'm not interested in reaching accommodation with the bosses. I'm not interested in it. I want to change society through my trade union as part of the class struggle that we're going through. You know, we look at the world, and even in economies that are supposed to be doing well because the economy has grown, You look at it, and even in places like America, you've got 3 individuals in America, 3 individuals who own as much as half the population in America. So the economy's not doing well. 3 individuals are doing well. And this is the sort of society that we're building. And we need to explain that to people in simple terms, and it's just not good enough. And the trade unions, I think, are just now organisations that collaborate with capital. And I think that we need a revival. We need to get back to what trade unions were in the beginning. Organisations that were democratic, that were rank and file, and would take action on the spot, empowering people.
But look, Steve, that's really important what you've said there, and I don't think any right-minded person could really disagree with that. It really needs to be ripped up and start again in terms of the way people look at this.
Yeah.
Now, I recall last summer, you yourself put yourself forward as a political candidate, and to my mind, certainly from a media perspective, we look towards people who rise in society and say they want to make a change, they want to do something, because that's what we try and do from an independent media house attitude. We want to make those changes. We want to bring information to people. Now, when people put themselves into the political arena, we know it's the public often has a very dim eye of the political arena. The fact is, it does exist. It is possible to go out there, even today. We can still go out and campaign. Although I do recall even during your campaign, there was some dirty goings on and shenanigans actually levied against you by the majority party that actually took office in government during that summer. So what I would say is, it looks to me, from my point of view, and looking through a camera at society, that looking at people who will say, something's got to change. So being able to stand up and make that change infers strongly that standing up politically would be a very smart move, because it is a change of politics. It therefore does require someone with a political mind and someone that can basically say, I understand where you are. I have empathy. For instance, in your case, I have, and in Sal's case, trade union experience. I have experience of this.
First of all, I mean, I heard something a long time ago, and it was very early when I was becoming a trade unionist, and it was what socialists should do is try to rise with their class and not out of their class. Okay, so it's bringing everybody up together. Now, the first thing that I would say, and if we're looking at democracy, and I want to try to explain this briefly, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional monarchy. Now, we're told that Parliament is sovereign, but Parliament has 3 parts to it. One of them is a monarch, an hereditary monarch, and power can only come downwards from the monarch. The monarch, and people can check this out, this is not me making it up, the monarch has the ability to dismiss Parliament, appoint Parliament, declare war. That is what the monarch can do now. It's just convention in this country that they don't do it. Secondly, second part of Parliament, the House of Lords, is a completely unelected chamber. No one elects them. And they can delay legislation, they can amend legislation, they can even instigate legislation. The third part, the House of Commons, we do elect them every 5 years. And then they go off and do what they want for those 5 years. And we can't touch them, because unless there's a by-election, someone dies, you're stuck with that person for 5 years. So that to me is not democracy. In fact, it's an affront to democracy. 2/3 of our parliament are not elected. The highest person is a hangover from a feudal society of robber barons, which is the head of state, by the way. Criticize other countries, but other countries at least elect their head of state. Ours happens to be, the Robert Baron from Germany, whose family, the Battenbergs, came over here. So we don't live in a democracy, and not many people understand that. So the process of education that we've got to go through is enormous.
I fully agree with what Steve said. He's broken down into structure. It's a reflection of the monopoly capitalist system, bourgeois democracy. And if we look at all the 3 levels, at the state level, being it's a constitutional monarchy, and decisions are made the ultimate, of course, the monarch, but at the parliamentary level, decisions are made by the ruling party and the cabinet. And these big, rich companies, multinationals, big capitalists have a big lobbying power in order to influence the shaping of policies. So the agenda is actually set in the interest of the big capitalists and private interests. People are just made to vote, and they're not engaged in the policy making after that at all. So the question, who sets the agenda? In the system, the capitalists set the agenda. What we want is the other way around. If people are voting, and they should be the ones who should be setting the agenda in their interests, and policy should be shaped to reflect their needs. Instead, the policy is shaped to reflect the profit-making needs of the capitalist class. That is a national level. But I've been involved in a lot of campaigns at a local level as well, and I'll come to elections as well. Now, at a local level, I've been involved in the Gasworks campaign in Southall, where private companies have actually taken that site and built many, many houses and for their own profit making, and adding to the pollution, adding to the traffic congestion, adding to the air quality, and people have suffered from that. Now, we campaigned, and actually from a small campaign it became a big campaign. We actually won the campaign, even the council forced to unanimously support the campaign in the end, and the mayor of London overturned it. At that time is Boris Johnson. Again, it shows the ultimate power lies in the hands of the upper elite, and the politicians working hand in hand in the interest of those private companies. Sham consultations were held at the local level. We're engaging people, we're asking people. We're going to have huge development of the gasworks. It's going to be to your benefit, all this, and documents given out, documents people can't even comprehend. And because decisions already made, it was just like a salesman selling to the public those plans. They were actually benefiting the big private concerns. That's the construction company, which is building those towering blocks in those places and benefiting from the profits made from selling those houses. Now, that is one of the campaigns I've mentioned at the Gate Government Workers. Even at a local level, decisions are already made, sham consultations are held, people are led to believe they've been engaged, they are made to rubber stamp those plans, but the plans get executed. So it's the same structure at a local level, as Steve has mentioned, at a national level. At national level, the ruling party cabinet. At a local level, it's also the cabinet that make decisions, and policies are dictated from above and followed at the local level as well. So in our struggles at the workplace, now, Steve mentioned that it's a capitalist democracy, it's a very hard struggle, a lot of education needed. That's quite true. Only by change of system can real democracy be brought about. But in the immediate struggles, people at the work level have to fight for their maximum wages above inflation rate. Often they get betrayed and their living standard keeps declining. So they're going to try to maximize their gains in that class struggle, whereas the capitalists are trying to maximize their gain and suppress the worker struggle. And we find that ongoing struggle, and it will carry on as long as the capitalist system is in place. So again, taking the national policies, let's take the war, for example. Now, 2 million people protested against the war in Iraq, and yet people were lied to, told them there were weapons of mass destruction, and massive destruction took place, and the whole Iraq was devastated, and lies being told to the public, and only exposed much later on once it's already been done. And now we're looking at the war in Israel. People don't want the war, didn't want the war in Iraq. Now look at the huge protests by the students, the youth, and activists. People are protesting against the genocide, and that's been completely ignored. And we're supposed to have a Labour Party, and that's spearheading the struggle in support of the Israel, and supporting genocide. So, and yet people are told, "Oh, you elected us. We're doing what you told us." There's no way people is supporting the war in Israel. No way they supported what happened in Iraq or in Libya, and that's all done for the benefit of the war industry, big capitalists, for their own profiteering at the expense, and people pay for the war. Our money, our hard work being used to finance wars of genocide. What kind of democracy is that? Now, what is the alternative? is that people should be deciding as to what policy should be in terms of defending our country against any foreign aggression. But certainly there's no need to attack and aggress on other countries. So, but they should be shaping the policies there. So setting the agenda is very important. And Steve mentioned about accountability. Once the leaders are appointed, whether at a national level or even a local level. Now, I know Steve worked very hard during elections. Now, he didn't stand there thinking he's going to become an MP and serve the existing system. He stood there. That will be an opportunity for him to educate and create awareness amongst the workers, amongst the people in the constituency, so they can stand up, fight for their rights. And he was coming forward as an activist to fight for their rights. And we need more of that. We need to bring forth activists at a constituency level who will be loyal and fight for the interest of the community, set the agenda, be accountable. And if they don't, as Steve mentioned, recall. And that will be democracy from below, policies be shaped from below, accountability, and replacement of those who betray. And if we can push forward this struggle in the sphere of democracy, make headway as far as possible, and that it could sharpen the class struggle further and perhaps even end up in changing the system that people do establish political power themselves and are able to exercise genuine workers' democracy.
You really crystallized clearly what these problems actually are. And just to recap one thing, for those of you who are watching this, so you can understand where you might be in part of this. It's not just us three people using our experience to have a discussion. This is for you, the viewer. It's not entertainment. So you've got an opportunity to make that difference. And how are you going to make that difference? Well, have a look at your local council. Have a look at the consultations, as they call them, that they carry out. And ask yourself, does it represent what you want? And do you feel you can make that difference? So make sure you do check in on a regular basis to these broadcasts so that you get to understand the difference that you can make. And it only has to be inch by inch. It doesn't have to be cataclysmic. If you have a lot of people doing this, then that can be a very, very powerful movement. Now, how are you going to do that? It's very, very important to bear in mind that clearly the word democracy is more like mockery. Once you realize how council, once they're elected, especially if they're a majority council for a particular party, and it doesn't matter which party it is, they then have carte blanche to make any decisions they wish from their executive, not from you, the voter. The only chance you get is to choose someone you might like to put them in, and that's it. Best people for this? Well, the best people would be those people who've specialized in it. Trade unionists. People who understand about the trades that people work in, the relevance to society, the relevance to those people that work in those businesses, and obviously the relevance as well, of course, to these people who run these businesses and these corporations themselves. So I'm going to ask Steve to come back in on what I'm about to say next. We'll leave that ball in your court, how we make those changes with the union bosses. And we know also that the skills that you have as trade unionists, you're able to bring those skills into the political arena to engage entirely the public as well. So it's a good ball. Over to you.
Well, first of all, I mean, there are divisions amongst workers, and there are divisions that the bosses play amongst workers. So the Trons were the trains operation managers. Some of them carried out the will of management viciously. So they didn't have much sympathy amongst other workers, but they got their comeuppance, and because management used them, and then when they were finished using them, got rid of them. And management aren't naive; they know exactly what they're doing, and ultimately they make a calculation. They make a calculation based on their spies and their observances. And they think, well, are we going to make more money out of bringing in cuts and bringing in changes, or is there going to be money lost through disruption for workers resisting these changes? And they make that calculation in a very cold and calculated way. And we have to understand that as workers. There's never been an industrial dispute in my lifetime or my knowledge that's ever been won through workers going and presenting the facts to management, and management going, yeah, you're absolutely right. We didn't think of that. We'll change our minds. They've only changed their minds when workers have gone in with the ability to go on strike. And the larger that ability and the more costly that ability is going to be to management, the more likely management are going to make concessions and reach an agreement. And I just see now that we have a trade union membership probably in its 40s, 50s and 60s. And if the young people don't want to come along to a meeting and be told they've got to pass a resolution at a branch and to get anything done, they want action. The young people are not apathetic. They're out there chaining themselves to railings and gluing themselves to roads and taking on the police over the issue of Palestine. And how do we harness that as a trade union movement? How do we, as a workers' movement, harness that? And we just need to think in a completely different way. What we have is not working. It's not working. And not only is it not working, it's dying on its feet. So we have to produce organizations that are actually attractive to people, that give people something to do rather than holding them back, that encourage initiative, empower people, and let them take their own struggles forward in the way that they want to take them.
Now, do you know what? I think you've reminded me of something here, and Sal, I'd like to bring you in on this as well. One thing that I remember we all experienced, and it really was quite refreshing. It certainly turned our heads from our experiences, and we didn't quite expect what happened, which was way back about 2016, when Jeremy Corbyn suddenly came to prominence, having been a backbencher for decades upon decades. Now, what was incredible about that was the movement that got formed known as Momentum. Now, for all the negative things that came out of it, for all the failures that happened, which I'm sure people who didn't want it to succeed will enjoy, or will let them enjoy. What's really important here is it was darn successful. A new method, for example, of Labour membership gave people a propelling vote. And what did that do? That put into an incredible hot seat one person who had the experience and had the track record to say, I want to make the changes. Now, in all honesty, I think it has to be said, he certainly didn't have the track record for leadership of a major political party. He was a backbencher. And whether or not that's the reason why this couldn't have come to a full fruition and all those full fruition ideas come through, we don't know. But on the post-mortem of this, and it's worth looking at too, is when it came to having to select shadow cabinet members and the likes, well, I think we all remember it was lacking. It was very unfortunate. It just wasn't sufficient on that side of it. So if we look back now to what you said, Steve, which is the trade unions need to make that change. They need to have those changes within that, because people work and people expect something of them in terms of leadership. So they have to make the change, not the individual. They've got to show that change, and the individual's got to say, do you know what? I like my shop steward. That's the guy I want, or I want to put him in for some. They're going to want to do it out of the desire for the fact that they know it's right and they know the benefits. Them, not the benefits of the person who wants to just get in by going to a branch where you know he'll end up being elected. Now that's the change I think that we need to consider. So it's understanding that you have sufficient people that are going to be at the top. It is as simple as that. For instance, Nigel Farage spent a lot of time doing what he was doing out with the European Union, and eventually he got what he wanted. That's a one-trick pony thing. Because even when Brexit came through and he got what he desired, he then said, no, I'm not going to be a leader, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. That's all he was going to do, because there wasn't sufficient people at the top of the policies that he was bringing to be able to carry it through. So he had that charisma to lead something like that, but he didn't have the sufficient backbone of people to go with it. And that's where I believe both of you are right when it comes to the changes needing to be within trade unions, trade union leadership. So that's where I believe it should be at. So,
yeah, Dave, they said running water doesn't become stale. I think that applies here as well. Steve mentioned a very important point. There were so many activists who make sacrifices. And it is amongst from those fighting forces, those active forces. They have got the track record. They're fighting for the decision making and the right policy. They have to be brought forth in positions of leadership in at the workplace, at constituency level, at every level, and uphold, as I said, even them accountable and recall if they don't. So again, it comes to the whole thing is democracy turned upside down. And it's a big challenge. We've got to fight that battle and bring forth activists. Often we try to put our trust in established leaders, but the leaders are there. They're fighting on the streets, in the demonstrations, in the protests. And we have to unify all those fighting forces into a strong movement and apply the principles of democracy from below and transform the situation so we don't end up with bureaucratic leaders, but actually leaders fighting genuinely and loyal to the cause of the membership and the working class.
And it can't be more clearer than that. So once again, to those of you who are listening into this, that's your clarion call. Get out there, get on with it. You're in a union, talk to your colleagues, talk to your comrades, have a conversation with them, show them this video, direct them there, and let us know what your thoughts are. Get those thoughts in and let us know so we can discuss those in further shows. Sal.
I think you've concluded pretty well. So the task is now it's a big challenge ahead. We need to educate them about democracy, real democracy, as opposed to bourgeois democracy, carry the struggle. And by fighting for real democracy, we'll be able to transform the situation, both in terms of immediate struggles and finally in the change of the capitalist system to be replaced by where workers are in power, they are the decision makers, and the system serves their interest of the vast majority, bringing security and prosperity for the vast majority.
Just about ending on that note, I'd like to give Steve one more opportunity to put his pennyworth in there to get us all going and make sure that all the viewers out there are going to understand what's on offer. Steve.
Well, the thing I would say to people is that, look, it's not easy, right? You're working full time, you're coming home exhausted. You haven't got a limited supply of energy, especially if you're a family person, you've got kids and that to look after. But ultimately, if we're going to have change in this world, we're going to have to sacrifice something. And, you know, there's that old cliche, you know, you can pay your gym fees, but unless you actually go to the gym, you're not going to get any fitter. And you can pay your union fees, but unless you get involved in the union's not going to get any fitter. I mean, the union will not serve you unless you actually make sure it serves you. So if you're paying money to work something every week, then you should be making sure that that money is well spent at very least. So attend your union meetings, put your point of view, and get people mobilized around your point of view if you can. And fight for empowerment in the workplace. Don't look for some great leader. Jeremy Corbyn, okay, was much better than other politicians, but ultimately he failed. He failed because he was he looked to the existing bureaucratic structures instead of the rank and file who were fighting. And we can't do the same either in trade unions or politically. We can't look to structures. Those structures weren't put in place by people like us. They were put in place to keep us in our place, to keep us down. And the minute we start fighting by the rules laid down by the enemy is the minute we've lost the battle. So we have to be ruthless. We have to be able to go out there and take this conflict any way we can. We've got to actually break the rules, break the anti-trade union laws, take action where we can, where it can get supported, and don't mind what the trade union bureaucrats say.
With those terrific fighting words, Steve Headley, thank you for joining Lokmedia today. Sal, thank you indeed for all your input.
Thank you, Dave and Steve. It's been a tremendous discussion. And thanks for the opportunity to share our views together.